This morning I'd like to take a few minutes, a little bit of time to talk about time. And not so much about time itself, but keeping time. And people started keeping time about 12,000 years ago in what was called the Neolithic period. They had something called, well, I don't know if they called it, but archaeologists have called it the lunisolar cycles. Of course, that means watching the sun and the moon and planting crops and all of that with the seasons and so forth. And it happened about 12,000 years ago. It started to come into shape. And then as agrarian societies started to settle with the Egyptians and the Assyrians, Babylonians, and the Hebrews, there was more and more accuracy in terms of keeping time. And then what was called the Common Era began. The Common Era was also called the Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord, but sometimes didn't cater to some people that didn't believe in that, so they just called it the Common Era. But Julius Caesar, in 45 years before the Common Era, started what was called, or initiated what was called the Julian calendar. And then in 1582, the Gregorian calendar was begun, and that was initiated by Pope Gregory. That's why it was called the Gregorian calendar, and that's what we adhere to today. January 28th, 2018 is a year on the calendar of the Gregorian calendar. And I make mention of time and the calendar because of something that happened in 2012 on December 21st, 2012. That was a result of another calendar in a whole different area of the world. In Mesoamerica, there were other people that had developed a very sophisticated calendar, the Mayan calendar. And I don't know whether or not in Canada there was an observance of this ending of the Mayan calendar. Was there in Canada? Something like that. There was quite a buzz around that in the Southwest. And I remember one woman at the end of a service came up to me, and this was probably December 18th or something. And she said, you know, on the 21st, everything is going to change. Everything is going to change. And I was just a little bit cynical with her, or I said, so the drug dealer in Phoenix is going to stop selling drugs and there's going to be no more crime? And she said, yes, everything is going to change. And I said, well, that's really interesting. I look forward to that. Well, what happened was the date came and the bills continued, and everything, as we know, continued, and it was all related to time. But when I was sitting with this, because I really didn't buy into that so much, I kind of wondered, I saw a cartoon one time where it was talking about the end of the Mayan calendar and whether or not the guys that were keeping track of time just didn't get paid anymore, so they just walked away from keeping time. But I was interested in the need for a breakthrough. The need for a greater fulfillment in time. And that what we were all looking for, at least in Southwest United States, was a greater purpose in time. And it wasn't about anything around the end of the world. It was more about looking at time and experience in a different way. And it had to do with the illumination around time. And I'm glad that people in Canada had this kind of awareness also, because I was wondering whether or not, when I was developing this talk, whether or not Canadians were just thinking that maybe Americans were just crazy. You know, a lot of Americans think other Americans are crazy, and that continues today. But underneath this issue of time, underneath the illusion really of the mind's making of meaning around the time that we're moving through, is a desire for lasting change. And I wonder whether or not in the universe there is or are influences to affect us through time. And even in this place, during the meditation, I continually feel, week after week, that you and I have this ability to affect and impact the human experience in time. Does anyone else feel that in this room? That there is a group consciousness that we can all join into and to affect the quality of life for all human beings. And even in the unity teachings, there is something that one of the founders called the second coming of Christ. And that has nothing to do with the second coming of Jesus. Maybe it does. I don't know. I would certainly be glad to see him. But what it meant was a second coming of spiritual awareness within humanity. Not only in a collective body of the whole, but in each individual. And that is what really keeps me moving in the spirit of my life. I have always had this feeling of the collective of humanity, the integration of humanity. How about you? Does that burn within your heart also? It does mine. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity Movement, stated that the end of the world is the end of the personal ego. And I have thought about that a great deal, that the end of the ego is not something that can really happen, that we need that localized point of intelligence within us. But what is required is the spiritualization or the divination of the egoic mind. Through all the various faith traditions on this planet, that unity itself is a faith tradition that is spiritually Christian, but that doesn't mean that we are holding on to that. We embrace all spiritual traditions as a means of quickening human consciousness. As one person recently said, an integral way of being. So we're looking at integrating consciousness. Which brings me today to an interesting topic that I have been observing within the human consciousness of humanity. And my talk title today, as you may have noticed, is Shining Light on Global Numbness. Kind of a play on words, because we talk a lot about shining a light on global warming. But what about global numbness? That if you and I in this room, and you in your own life, and hundreds of people that you know, are dedicated to the awakening of humanity, what is it that may stand in the way of that process? What are the possible aspects of that? And I don't know whether or not, I was talking with somebody the other day, and I was doing a reality check, because I was feeling a lot of energy around this, about how the current modes of communication with people may be affecting the awakening process. On this little magazine that we get every week, it's called The Week. It's called Facebook's Regrets. Facebook's Regrets. And I wanted to read to you an excerpt from an article. Sometimes I feel like I'm going out on a limb here with some of this stuff. Because, you know, smartphones and technology and AI are so popular, and there's so much that's developing within this technology that we are just getting on board with. I was at a dinner party last week with some good friends. We're developing a good friendship, and they had this little pod on one of their tables, and I said, "What's that?" Well, that's a mechanism that you can just say hello to, and you can order groceries, you can help schedule your life with. And I said, "Can you ask it what God is?" And they said yes, and I did. And the gist of what I remember from that was Supreme Being. But I said, you know, this little gadget stores all the information about what it is that you are asking of it. Does that bother you at all? And they said something beautiful. They said, "We don't have anything to hide." And that was a lovely thing from the purity of their hearts. But I question within myself, is that just a bit naive in a way? And I mean no criticism of our friends, because they're very, very beautiful people. But this one little article under technology says, "Are our kids addicted to devices?" How many people in this room have been out to eat and you see in a booth across the way 4 people looking at their smartphones and not talking to each other at all? How does that feel? Maybe it's none of our business. Maybe it's just them ordering groceries. I don't know what they're doing. But it has to do somehow within my own psyche. And people could say, "Well, Bruce, don't be a dinosaur. This is the thing of the future, and get on board." But I'm a social scientist, and I'm also a spiritual scientist. And I look at things that impact the evolution of human consciousness, the illumination of human consciousness. And we could say, well, this little gadget is a byproduct of the evolution of human consciousness, that it's very efficient, that you can speak into it and order groceries, and in 24 hours, it can be at your doorstep. That's pretty darn cool. When you think about 200 years ago, people had to go out and do all kinds of things just to have a meal. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. But is it an aid of quickening spiritual consciousness, or is it something else? And I want to just share with you a little bit from this article. It's the easiest babysitting hack known to modern adults. Hand a fussy child a smartphone or tablet, and voila, the kid is quiet, eyes wide and still. Plenty of parents rely on this magic trick, but as children age into teens, hunched over their smartphones, oblivious to the world, moms and dads are increasingly worried about the perils of digital addiction. An Apple publisher sent a letter to fund research into what its ubiquitous products might do to a child's brain. Parents have long wondered if the 6 hours a day the average teenager spends in front of a screen is safe. Research suggests it's not. With sleep disorders, sleep deprivation, depression, and even suicidal thoughts becoming alarmingly prevalent among young smartphone users. And I wrote also, because of a conversation I had with a friend, he said, a lot of young people are increasingly having anxiety disorders around the use of technology, because if they don't get the number of likes that they require, they are somehow less than. Now this is kind of my soapbox, I realize. But there is an element of concern that I have that I wanted to just voice here. I remember some years ago in Arizona, they were automatically installing smart meters on people's homes, on the side of their homes. And the research had showed that some of that vibration and energy fluctuation was impacting people with all types of maladies. And I felt challenged to bring it up within this type of environment, because we could say, well, it's not appropriate to talk about it here. It's not uplifting. It's not adding to the illumination of human beings. People don't come here to hear about problems in the culture, especially if we're all really dialed into it. Yes, I have one too. But I just feel like I need to question whether or not what we're creating is for the highest good, especially spiritually. So I want to reframe it. And I want to talk about something that is uplifting, that is the goal of raising human consciousness. And in the book Prosperity by Charles Fillmore, written many years ago, He said, "You may be wondering why you have been challenged with spiritual illumination or to find the consciousness of spiritual substance." He says, "Perhaps the reason is here, a lack of room for the true thoughts becoming other thoughts, because other thoughts fill up your mind." Thus, the whole question, are we becoming numbed out through too much information? And each of us has to say yea or nay to that in our own way. Once again, the little pod on a table at home is so efficient and it's so seductive. It was very seductive to me. It crossed my mind, maybe we should get one of those. Nothing wrong. Apparently, nothing wrong. But people are increasingly addicted to this technology. So, the focus that I have for this spiritual community is about awakening. And we have to ask ourselves, is all of this technology contributing or detracting from that process? Are we as a human family becoming so addicted to our technology that we're forgetting about whether or not we have a spiritual life? A friend of mine yesterday, she said, yeah, it's like we're walking around like a brain on a stick. There's no heart in it. There's no soulfulness within the technology, and that somehow there needs to be a balance struck. And that's why I'm even speaking about this today. It's very important, I feel, to stay connected to our hearts, to stay connected to our souls, and to see the technology as simply a tool. But if people are so addicted to it that they panic if they don't have their phone, that may be something else. Reverend Sue Sicking, a Unity minister that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago from her book, Only Believe, she talks about illumination. And she says, true illumination is not just mental or intellectual. It is an awakening to the deep inner source from which the mind and intellect draw their power. So are we kings and queens of technology, or is it the king of us? It has to be really addressed and asked. At least that's what's moving within my soul. And it may not even be a popular subject. But sometimes I feel that it's important to just put it out there. Take a risk. Within the domain of technology, what about inner technology? What about working with the secret teachings of faith traditions from all of the world? The inner teachings of not only Christianity, but of Buddhism and Sikhism. There are ways and means of the human family to be quickened through our cultivation, our attention. Charles Fillmore talked about the 12 powers of man, indwelling centers within the body, that as we give our attention to those centers and we say, I am life, or I am order, I am strength, I am wisdom, I am love, I am power, I am understanding, wisdom, faith, enthusiasm. All of these inner faculties are quickened. This is inner technology, to balance out the outer with inner technology. I would like to have us practice that for just a moment. Are you open to that? Isn't that why we're here? So that, and then there's a question. What is the purpose of incarnation? What is the purpose of being on the planet? Is it to be engulfed with continual technology? Or is it a servant to humanity? So I invite you to just, if you're willing, to just close your eyes for a moment. To focus in on your heart. And what I want to share with you is a reflection of the inner technology of spirituality that goes beyond just having faith. Focus in your heart. And I want to use some words that you may not be accustomed to. But just go with it. See what happens. Activate, energize, amplify, and anchor God's energy within my heart, beloved Spirit. And move your attention down below your feet to what might be called a base center or chakra. Activate, energize, amplify, and anchor your energy, beloved God, in this place, below my feet, so that I am grounded. Ground this energy into the core of the earth, into the planet, into beloved Gaia, Divine Mother of this planet. Bless this planet. Move this energy up into, or your attention up into the base of your spine, what Charles Fillmore would call the life center. To clear, to transform and transmute anything that you may be holding on to from a survival standpoint. This is the life center at the base of your spine that gives you life. And if you're feeling a lack of life or vitality, you can focus in that place. And you can raise that focus up into the second center. It has to do with emotions and feelings and sexuality. And clear this center so that people, all of us, if we have felt abused on any level in this lifetime, this area can be cleansed and released and forgiven. And then you can move that energy up into your solar plexus, your place of personal power within your solar plexus, and call your power back from wherever you have given it away in your life. Activate, energize, amplify, and anchor within your solar plexus. And bring that up into your heart. If you have been feeling guarded in your heart center, that you don't want to open your heart anymore to life because of situations and circumstances. Activate, energize, amplify, and anchor God's energy in your heart to clear the heart with love and moving up into your throat, the speech center. If you have felt challenged to speak your truth, whenever you feel that you want to speak your truth but you can't, you hold yourself back. Activate, energize, amplify, and anchor in your throat so that the energy is clear to move from your heart to your center between your eyes. Some would call it the third eye. In the East, they call it the ajna, center. Activate, energize, amplify, anchor within that place to clear your mind. To bless the areas of your brain, the thalamus and hypothalamus, hippocampus, amygdala, striatus, pons, cerebellum, lobes of your brain, the temporal lobes, the parietal lobes, the frontal lobe. Bless all of these aspects of your body systems. Send light and love and power to all the energy systems of your body, to your emotional life, your mental life, call upon greater energies of your soul to move down into your body so that you don't feel so separate from God. This is the inner technology. This is the way of healing and integration. And just ask yourself right now how you feel internally. This may be all very different and strange to you. But this is what was taught all along, over time, in the inner schools, the mystery schools on the planet. There was the outer teachings for those that required the outer teachings. And then there was the few people that gravitated to wanting to be taught the inner teachings. That propelled them and quickened them towards mastery of self. This is what Jesus taught the disciples, the inner teachings, so that they could go forth and heal and help and be of service. And I don't know whether or not this serves you or not, but it is my responsibility, I feel. It is my responsibility to facilitate a quickening within you, if it is within the timing of your soul to do so. To help with enlightened awareness within your own life. And I hope that you can see the intention on my part to help you be freer within your own life. To remember who we are as spiritual beings. This quickening process will aid in that. So when you're ready, you can come back. So final words on my part is just that this isn't just talking about God. This is about having direct experience of God, of you being part of God, and you having a realization within your own soul, so that when you come up against things in the outer world, you really have a knowing of who you are and what you're here to do. Thank you.